Uno toma uno.
This is Leon Trotsky. He is one of the key architects of the Soviet Union and one of the key people who led the Bolsheviks to victory in the late 1910s, where Lenin seized power. Everyone is expecting him to be his natural successor, but now, in 1940, he is residing in Mexico after being exiled by the very Soviet Union he once helped build, and is currently writing a book about Stalin. But as the pages begin to expose his flaws and his unethical rise to power, Stalin realizes he has to do whatever it takes to keep this book from ever seeing the light of day, and soon Trotsky is lying slumped on a hospital bed, deceased. 20 years ago, he was considered a national hero. So how did Stalin and Trotsky go from being allies to Stalin having Trotsky murdered in the most sadistic fashion? You're looking at Joseph Stalin. He is currently holding a funeral wreath at Premier Vladimir Lenin's funeral. At the same funeral, one important man is missing. That man is Leon Trotsky. He is currently residing in the Caucasus, while funeral goers pay their respects to their former premier, a man he had helped gain power, but this wasn't by accident. However, the brutal first step of Joseph Stalin's merciless plan for premiership. At the time, Leon Trotsky was considered Joseph Stalin's strongest competitor, since he had been at the forefront of the Russian Revolution and had gained huge amounts of goodwill across the country, while Stalin was barely known by the public. So to gain an edge, he had deliberately sent him the wrong date of the funeral, and this made Trotsky look extremely disrespectful, while Stalin looked like Lenin's nearest and dearest mourner. Slowly he was cut from decision-making, while Stalin quietly formed a political alliance with Zinoviev and Kamenev, two of Trotsky's old comrades. Together they controlled the party's propaganda machine, who spoke at meetings and who interpreted Lenin's legacy for the public. Trotsky didn't know it yet, but the circle around him was leaving him behind. But it got even worse. Lenin had written a final letter, a testament, warning that Stalin was too rude and should be removed from leadership entirely, which Trotsky even received privately. Right then and there, he had the ability to expose Stalin and destroy any hope he had for premiership, but he refused, believing it would fracture the party during a fragile moment. This was a mistake. Within a few months, a few of Stalin's allies blocked the publication of Lenin's testament, and after a few years, Stalin had climbed the ladder to premiership thanks to a handful of smart political moves, while Trotsky's reputation was destroyed. In early 1929, he's deported to Turkey in exile, and over the next few years he spent his life living in different nations. He had lost everything. But that wasn't all. Every country he was living in grew increasingly nervous. French police restricted his movements, and Norway even placed him under house arrest. Even in exile, he wasn't safe. During this time, he wrote multiple books about Marxism and how Stalin betrayed the Bolshevik Revolution. He also ran multiple opposition groups, including the Fourth International, to fight against capitalism and Stalinism. This made him an urgent target that needed to be wiped off the map. And as Trotsky thought his journey couldn't get worse, a new threat emerged. As the Great Purge started in the late 1930s, Trotskyists started to suffer, a lot. Hundreds of thousands of alleged Trotskyists are executed, and as Trotsky's circle is put on trial, around 16 confess to plotting with him to kill Stalin and other Soviet leaders. They are sentenced to death, and so is Trotsky, by any means necessary. But the Soviet NKVD had an issue. See, since Trotsky was residing in Mexico, Stalin couldn't legally get to him. So the NKVD began building access. They started by approaching local communist groups and questioning sympathizers. They also started mapping the layout of Trotsky's home, the guard rotations, and even the blind spots in the walls. Trotsky knew something was off. 4 years later, he is sitting at his villa in the northern municipality of Coyoacan, New Mexico. His nightmare is about to become reality. Outside the villa, multiple NKVD agents have shown up. However, his house is heavily fortified with over 20 bodyguards, but as one of Trotsky's own guards unlocks the door and lets them in deliberately, the remaining guards are completely overwhelmed as swarms of agents and sympathizers storm the house. Among the attackers is famous Mexican painter David Alfaro Siqueiros, who had fought in the Spanish Civil War and thought political violence was mandatory. These men move with unsettling precision. Dressed in police uniforms and armed with machine guns, electric saws and rope ladders, they silently subdue the officers outside, overwhelm the guards within the compound, and force their way inside and near Trotsky's bedroom. For several minutes, they dump mags through the walls and windows and toss incendiaries into rooms as Trotsky is laying beneath a bed and simply has to pray. His young grandson is hit. After thoroughly ruining the house with machine gun fire and explosives, the attackers leave in the belief that nobody could have survived the assault. They were mistaken. Trotsky was unhurt and still fully alive. In the hours that followed, he looked at the wreckage of his home while giving statements to investigators. He stressed that the attack was no random act, but a coordinated operation from Moscow. Despite his house being left in ruins, he remained composed, publicly insisting that the attempt had failed only through what he called an accident of fate. but the survival of this assault did little to comfort him or his family. He knew that Stalin wasn't finished. Trotsky quickly increased security around the building and ordered walls and watchtowers to be built. He kept writing furiously to expose the assassination attempts to the public, but Stalin had already prepared his response, and this time Trotsky wouldn't survive. A few months earlier, Ramon Mercader, a staunch Spanish communist, arrived in Mexico City. He is a secret NKVD agent. While studying at the Sorbonne University in Paris a few years earlier, he had met and befriended a young woman. She was a loyal follower of Trotsky and was even a secret companion of him. This was his key into Trotsky's circle. Back in Mexico, he quickly invites the girl to join him there, and within a few months, Ramon starts to frequent Trotsky's house under a Canadian passport and the name Frank Jackson. He starts doing favors, and quickly, he is seen as a friend of the house. Trotsky thought he was off, but didn't say anything. This was a mistake. The day of the assassination had arrived. It was a particularly warm afternoon. Ramon is wearing a raincoat. Despite this being a strange choice for the humid climate of New Mexico, no one said a word. Underneath it, he's hiding an ice axe. As he walked up to the study inside Trotsky's house, he laid his raincoat on the table in such a way that he was able to retrieve the ice axe. And as Trotsky starts reading an article, he takes out the axe and hits him as hard as he possibly could in the side of the head. As bodyguards hear the noise next door, they storm the room and start beating Ramon senselessly. After a while, cops arrive. Ramon is immediately forced out of the house with a broken hand. He is arrested by Mexican police. Doctors thought Trotsky looked fine, although bloodied up, but something was off. The ice pick had pierced deep into his brain, and by the next day he was dead from the shock. Ramon's vile act had finally closed the long, bitter conflict between Stalin and Trotsky. But his story wasn't finished. During the trial of the assassination, Ramon refused to speak. Investigators thought he simply was a quiet foreigner who had wandered into a political feud he barely understood, but that wasn't the truth. He wasn't just a communist fanatic, but a weapon of the Soviet Union. Despite attempts to interrogate him, he held his cover for months, but slowly, Mexican authorities uncovered fragments of his real identity, and the scale of the conspiracy became almost impossible to ignore. Ramon received the maximum possible sentence, 20 years in a Mexican prison. Back in Moscow, Stalin remained untouchable. He denied involvement publicly, praised Soviet peace abroad, and claimed Trotsky had been destroyed by his own followers. But behind closed doors, he congratulated the NKVD. The rival he had feared for 2 decades was finally gone. The next morning, crowds gathered outside his villa. They stared at the house, which would later become a huge tourist attraction in Mexico City. Over the coming years, the assassination symbolized Stalin's position as the absolute ruler. The Bolshevik opposition knew that no one was safe. Many who had previously considered exile as a possible safe haven were proven wrong, and the public nature of Trotsky's murder in Mexico sent a political message globally: dissent equals death. As for Ramon Mercader, he served his 20 years in a Mexican prison before being released into the public. He'd later live in the Soviet Union, where he was celebrated as a national hero before dying in 1978 in Cuba.